Welcome to the gold mine. These two players are competing for the notorious player list. Big blind is $20. The gentleman calls. Player checks. The gentleman calls.
I fold.
The gentleman wins $100.
I check.
Turn.
Check.
The gentleman calls.
I check. Those chips are mine. I raise you.
The flop. The gentleman calls. The gentleman wins $1,256.
Check, I check. I raise you. I fold. Raise. I fold.
The gentleman wins $364. The gentleman calls.
I check.
The river.
Check, I check.
Player checks. The gentleman wins $40. The gentleman calls. Player checks. Player checks.
I knew I was good.
The gentleman calls.
Fold.
The gentleman wins $442.
I fold.
The gentleman wins $30. The gentleman calls.
I check. Check, I check.
Turn.
I check. Fold.
The gentleman wins $270. The gentleman calls. The gentleman calls. The gentleman calls. All in $850.
Those chips are mine.
The gentleman calls.
I fold.
The gentleman wins $608. The flop.
Raise.
The gentleman
Turn.
calls. The river. All in $666. The gentleman wins $1,221. The gentleman calls.
I'm raising.
The gentleman calls.
Check, I check. I'm raising. Man, I'm good. I'm raising.
Flop.
Fold. I win.
The gentleman calls.
I fold.
The gentleman wins $60.
Raise.
The gentleman calls.
I check. I fold. I'm raising. Fold.
The gentleman wins $580. The gentleman calls.
I check.
Player checks.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well.
The gentleman calls.
Check.
River.
I raise you.
The gentleman calls.
Fold.
The gentleman wins $475.
Fold.
The gentleman wins $30.
Check. Fold.
The gentleman wins $60.
Fold.
The gentleman calls. Flop.
Raise. Sorry, I won. Boy, I'm shaking. I fold.
The gentleman wins $30.
Phew, that's a lot. I'm
bet.
raising. I check.
The gentleman calls.
Check, I check.
All in with $240.
Look out for me.
The gentleman calls.
I fold.
The gentleman wins $141. The gentleman calls.
Check. Check.
Player checks. River.
Raise.
All in $440. The gentleman wins $880.
I raise you. I fold.
The gentleman calls.
I check. Fold.
The gentleman wins $60. Player checks. The flop.
I fold.
The gentleman wins $60.
I check. Check, I check.
The gentleman
Turn.
calls. The river.
I raise you. I got you. Boy, I'm shaking. Fold.
The gentleman wins $100. The gentleman calls.
I raise you. I got you. Fold.
The gentleman wins $30.
I check. I'm raising.
The gentleman calls.
Check, I check.
The river. All in with $674. The gentleman wins $1,348.
I raise you. I fold.
The gentleman wins $380. The gentleman calls.
Check, I check. Check, I check. Fold.
The gentleman wins $60.
Fold.
The gentleman calls.
Raise. I fold.
The gentleman wins $670. The gentleman calls.
I fold.
The gentleman wins $220. Flop.
Check, I check. I fold.
The gentleman wins $170.
Check, I check. Raise. Those chips are mine.
The gentleman calls.
Raise.
The flop.
Check. I fold. I fold.
The gentleman wins $30.
I check. I fold.
The gentleman wins $60. The gentleman calls. Flop.
I fold.
The gentleman calls. The flop.
Check. I fold.
The gentleman wins $250. The gentleman calls.
I fold.
The gentleman wins $60. The gentleman calls. The gentleman calls. The gentleman wins $100. The gentleman calls. Flop.
I fold.
The gentleman wins $60.
I check.
The gentleman calls.
I'm raising. Give me the chips. Raise. I fold.
The gentleman wins $556.
Phew, that's a lot to bet.
Turn.
Check.
River. All in $346. The gentleman wins $477. The gentleman calls. Player checks.
Flop.
The gentleman calls. Player checks. All in, $477. The gentleman wins, $517. The gentleman calls.
I raise it. Fold.
The gentleman wins, $712. Flop. Player checks. The river. All in with 273. Split pot.
Raised. I fold.
The gentleman wins, $295.
I'm raising.
The gentleman calls. All in, $168. The gentleman calls.
Check, I check. I raise it.
The gentleman calls. River.
Check. Man, I'm good.
Player checks. The flop.
I fold.
The gentleman wins, $60. The gentleman calls.
I check. Check. I fold.
The gentleman wins, $60. Turn. The gentleman calls.
River. I raise it. Give me the chips.
The gentleman calls.
Fold.
The gentleman wins, $445.
I raise it.
The gentleman calls. The gentleman wins, $1,017. The gentleman calls.
I check. I check. Check, I check. I'm raising. Those chips are mine. Raised. I fold.
The gentleman wins, $208. The gentleman calls.
I raise it.
The gentleman calls.
Check, I check.
The gentleman calls. The gentleman wins, $826. The gentleman calls.
Check, I check.
Player checks.
Fold.
The gentleman wins, $692. The gentleman calls. The flop.
I check. Fold.
The gentleman wins, $424. The flop. The gentleman calls. River.
Raised. Those chips are mine.
Flop.
Fold.
The gentleman wins $100.
I raise you.
The gentleman
Turn.
calls. The gentleman wins $888. The gentleman calls. The flop.
I raise you.
The gentleman
Turn.
calls. River.
I'm raising. I raise you.
The flop.
Raise.
The gentleman
Turn.
calls. The gentleman wins $1,178.
Raise.
The gentleman calls.
Raise. These are real skills here.
Player checks. The flop.
I raise you.
The gentleman
Turn.
calls. River.
I'm raising. These are real skills here.
The gentleman calls.
Check, I check. Fold.
The gentleman wins $60.
I'm raising. I fold.
The gentleman calls. Flop.
I fold. I'm raising. I fold.
The gentleman calls.
I check. Raise. I got you.
The gentleman calls. The gentleman calls.
Fold.
The gentleman wins $123.
Raise.
The flop.
Fold.
The gentleman wins $313. Turn.
Look out for me.
The gentleman calls. Flop.
Check, I check.
Turn.
I check.
The gentleman calls.
River.
The gentleman wins $234.
Raise.
Flop.
I fold.
The gentleman wins $582. The gentleman calls. The flop. The gentleman calls.
Check, I check.
Player checks.
Check.
Player checks.
Look out for me. I'm raising.
The gentleman calls. All in $1,458. The gentleman wins $1,843. The gentleman calls. All in with $157. River. The gentleman wins $314. The gentleman calls. The flop. Player checks. The river. The gentleman wins $40. The gentleman calls. The flop.
I check. I fold.
The gentleman wins $60.
I fold.
The gentleman wins $60.
Check, I check. Check, I check.
Turn.
I raise you. I got you. I raise you. I fold. Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. I'm raising.
The flop. All in with $482.
I raise you.
The gentleman calls.
I raise you. I knew I was good. Raise. I fold.
The gentleman wins $406. The gentleman calls.
I fold.
The gentleman wins $253. The gentleman calls. The flop. The river.
I raise you. I'm the winner.
Flop.
I check.
Turn.
I check.
Player checks.
I check.
The gentleman calls. The gentleman wins $162.
I raise you.
The gentleman calls. Flop. The gentleman calls. The gentleman wins $1,012. The flop.
Check. I fold.
The gentleman wins $100.
Boy, I'm shaking.
The flop.
I fold.
The gentleman wins $60.
Check. I fold.
The gentleman wins $60.
I'm raising.
The gentleman calls.
Fold.
The gentleman wins $420. The gentleman calls.
Check, I check. Whew, that's a lot. I raised you. I knew I was good.
The gentleman calls. The flop. Player checks. Player checks.
I'm raising. Those chips are mine. I check. I check. Check. Raised.
The gentleman calls.
Those chips are mine. I raised it.
Flop. River.
Oh, what luck.
The gentleman wins $306.
I check. Check, I check.
Turn.
I raise it.
The gentleman calls.
Check, I check.
All in $306. The gentleman calls. Flop. Player checks.
Check.
All in $612. The gentleman wins $632.
Raise. I got you. I raise you.
The gentleman calls.
I fold.
The gentleman wins $493.
I'm raising. I fold.
The gentleman wins $307.
Boy, I'm shaking. I raise it.
The gentleman calls.
Fold.
The gentleman wins $100.
I check. I raise you.
The gentleman calls. The gentleman wins $361. Player checks. Turn. The river.
I raise you. I got you.
The gentleman calls. The flop.
I check. I check.
River.
Check, I check.
All in with $849. The gentleman wins $869. The gentleman calls.
I check.
The river. All in with $869. The gentleman wins $889.
Raise.
The flop.
I check. I fold.
The gentleman wins $468.
I'm raising. I fold.
The gentleman calls.
Check. Fold.
The gentleman wins $60.
I fold. Check, I check. Check.
The gentleman
Turn.
calls. The gentleman wins $498. The gentleman calls.
I raise it.
The gentleman
The
calls.
flop. Check. I fold.
The gentleman wins $464.
Raise.
Flop.
Check, I check.
Player checks.
I knew I was good. Check, I check. Boy, I'm shaking. I win.
The gentleman wins $514.
Raise.
The gentleman calls.
Fold.
The gentleman wins $281. The gentleman calls. The gentleman calls.
I fold.
The gentleman calls. The gentleman calls. The river.
I'm raising. Sorry, I won. Fold. I raise it. I fold.
The gentleman wins $523. The gentleman calls.
Check, I check. I fold.
The gentleman wins $60. The flop.
Fold.
The gentleman wins $113. The gentleman calls.
Check, I check. I'm raising. Look out for me.
The gentleman calls. The flop.
Raise. Fold.
The gentleman wins $431. The gentleman calls. Flop.
I fold. Boy, I'm shaking. I'm raising.
The gentleman calls. Player checks. Turn. River.
Sorry, I won.
The gentleman calls.
flop. Check. Check. I raise you.
All in with $500. The gentleman wins $1,370.